Be careful with this message, because once you accept it, you can't go back to chasing validation. It confirms the moment your nervous system stopped negotiating for worth and started resting in it. That's the answer key the test was waiting for, and you just filled it in without even noticing. For the longest time, you thought the test was about achievement, about hitting the right goals, proving your worth, showing everyone what you're capable of. You thought you had to earn your way through, hustle harder, be more, do more, become someone worthy of the life you wanted, and you tried. You showed up. You pushed through the exhaustion, the doubt, the setbacks, but nothing seemed to work the way you expected. That's because you were taking the wrong test. The real test wasn't about what you could do. It was about what you could let go of. And you just let go of the last thing that was holding you back. Think about the last few weeks. Something changed in how you respond to disappointment. Maybe you didn't spiral the way you used to. Maybe you felt rejection, but not devastation. Maybe you stopped checking your phone every 5 minutes, waiting for validation. That shift, that quiet release of needing things to go a certain way, that was the final answer. And you didn't even realize you were filling it in. In psychology, there's a concept called the extinction of learned helplessness. When someone has been conditioned to believe their actions don't matter, they stop trying. But there's a specific moment when that conditioning breaks. Not because they suddenly succeed, but because they stop needing success to define their worth. That moment, that internal liberation, is when real power returns. You just crossed that threshold. Here's what makes this different from every other time you thought you were done struggling. You're not trying to convince yourself anymore. You're not forcing positivity or repeating affirmations that don't quite land. You just know. And that knowing didn't come from finally getting what you wanted. It came from realizing you're complete, whether you get it or not. What the test was really measuring. The final test was never about external achievements. It was about internal stability. Could you stay grounded when nothing made sense? Could you keep showing up when results didn't come? Could you choose yourself even when no one was choosing you? Those were the questions. And every time you thought you were failing, you were actually answering them correctly. Think about what tests are supposed to measure. In education, tests assess whether you've internalized information, whether you can apply knowledge under pressure, whether you understand principles deeply enough that they've become automatic. The universe works the same way. It doesn't test your ability to get what you want. It tests your ability to be who you are, regardless of what you get. Cognitive behavioral therapy has a term for this: distress tolerance. It's the ability to experience discomfort without needing to immediately fix, avoid, or numb it. Most people fail here. The moment things get hard, they reach for distraction, substance, escape, anything to avoid sitting with uncertainty. But you didn't. You sat in it. Day after day, week after week, you stayed present with the discomfort. And that presence, that willingness to feel it without running, that's what developed your capacity. Capacity isn't about how much you can handle when things are good. It's about how much you can hold when things are unclear. And you've been building that capacity in ways you couldn't see. Every morning you woke up without a clear path, but got up anyway. Every time you felt like giving up, but chose one more day. Every moment you questioned everything, but didn't quit. Those weren't failures, those were reps. And you just hit the threshold where the muscle is strong enough to hold anything. Here's the part most people miss. The test gets harder right before you pass it. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the final questions have to be real. You can't fake your way through them. You can't pretend to be okay when you're not. You can't perform confidence you don't feel. The test has to strip away every false layer until only truth remains. And truth is what you've been living in. Think about the last major challenge you faced. How did you respond? If this had happened a year ago, you probably would have collapsed, blamed yourself, spiraled into worst-case scenarios. But this time you didn't. You felt the disappointment, processed it, and kept moving. Not because you're tougher now, because you're clearer. And clarity is what allows you to pass tests that would have destroyed earlier versions of you. Neuroscience explains this through stress inoculation. When you're exposed to manageable levels of stress repeatedly, your nervous system adapts. It learns that stress isn't fatal, that discomfort is temporary, that you can survive uncertainty. Over time, your window of tolerance expands. What used to break you now barely phases you, not because the challenges got easier, but because you got stronger without realizing it. That's what the final test measured. Not whether you could avoid stress, but whether you could metabolize it, whether you could transform pressure into presence instead of panic. And the fact that you're here, reading this, still standing, still showing up, that's proof you passed. How you passed without knowing it. Here's the strange part. Most people don't realize they passed until long after the test is over. They're still waiting for an official result, some external confirmation that they made it through. But the confirmation doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside. And it shows up as a feeling you can't quite name but definitely recognize. It feels like settling, like something that was clenched finally released, like you've been holding your breath for months and just now remembered you can exhale. That's not relief from success. That's integration. Your system recognizing that the struggle is complete, that the lesson landed, that you don't need to keep proving anything because the proof already exists in who you've become. Behavioral psychology calls this mastery. It's the stage where a skill becomes so internalized, you stop thinking about it. You don't have to remind yourself to stay grounded. You just are. You don't have to force yourself to choose self-respect. It's automatic. The conscious effort that used to be required has dissolved into unconscious competence. And that's how you know you passed. The test stops feeling like a test. Think about learning to drive. At first, every action requires focus. Check the mirror, signal, accelerate, brake. You're hyper-aware of every movement because one mistake could be fatal. But after enough repetition, it becomes second nature. You drive without thinking. The skill integrated so deeply, it no longer requires attention. That's where you are with the final test. You're not trying to pass anymore. You already did, and now you're just living from that completion. Here's what happened without you noticing. You stopped performing. For years, you've been performing strength, confidence, optimism, trying to convince yourself and everyone else that you were okay. But recently, you stopped. Not because you gave up, because you didn't need the performance anymore. You became the thing you were trying to perform, and the moment pretending stopped. Authenticity emerged. That's the passing grade. There's a concept in Zen Buddhism called effortless effort. It's the state where action flows naturally without force, where you're fully engaged but not straining, where results come not from pushing but from alignment. Western culture misunderstands this as laziness, but it's actually the highest form of mastery. You've been forcing for so long that you forgot what flow feels like. And now, finally, you're remembering. You might have noticed that decisions have gotten easier lately. Not because the choices are clearer, but because you trust yourself more. You don't second-guess every move. You don't need 3 opinions before you act. You check in with yourself, feel the answer, and move. That trust, that internal authority, only develops after you've been tested enough times to know you won't abandon yourself. And you proved it. Over and over, until your nervous system finally believed it. What happens after you pass? Here's what no one tells you about passing the final test. Life doesn't suddenly get easy. Challenges don't stop. Uncertainty doesn't disappear. What changes is your relationship to all of it. You stop seeing obstacles as evidence that you're failing and start seeing them as information about where to adjust. The shift is subtle but seismic. Think about someone who's fluent in a second language. They still encounter words they don't know, grammar that confuses them, conversations that require effort. But they don't panic. They don't think, "I'm terrible at this language." They just pause, figure it out, and keep going. Because fluency isn't about never struggling. It's about struggling without losing confidence in your ability. That's where you are now, fluent in yourself. You'll notice opportunities start appearing differently. Not because the universe suddenly decided to reward you, but because you're finally calibrated to recognize them. Before, you were so focused on what you thought you needed that you missed what was actually available. But now, with the pressure off, with the performance dropped, with the desperation gone, you can see clearly. And clear vision is what allows you to move toward what's actually meant for you instead of what you think should be. Here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing to pass tests, you pass them all. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth becomes undeniable. Not to others, they'll catch up eventually. To yourself, and self-recognition is the only recognition that actually matters, because once you know who you are, no one can convince you otherwise. Social psychologists have studied this through the concept of self-verification. People are drawn to those who are certain about themselves, not arrogant, not performative, just clear. When you know who you are, others trust that knowing. They don't question it. They don't test it. They just accept it and align accordingly. That's why everything is about to get easier. Not because the world changed, but because your signal got clearer. You might be wondering what comes next. What happens after the final test? And the answer is simpler than you think. You live, not in survival mode, not in proving mode, in presence. You make decisions based on what feels true instead of what looks impressive. You build relationships based on resonance instead of utility. You pursue goals because they excite you, not because they validate you. This video appeared because you needed confirmation. Not that you're about to pass, that you already did. The test is over. The results are in. And you don't need to wait for anyone to hand you a certificate or tell you that you're ready. You are ready. You've been ready. You just needed to stop questioning it long enough to feel it, the exhaustion you've been carrying. That's not the weight of failing. That's the weight of finally being done. Your body has been holding tension, waiting for the next blow, the next rejection, the next test. And now it's getting the signal. You can relax. The proving is over. What comes next isn't about earning. It's about receiving. So here's your confirmation. You passed. The final test wasn't about being perfect or never struggling or achieving some impossible standard. It was about staying true to yourself when every external pressure told you to be someone else. And you did. You stayed. You didn't abandon yourself for approval. You didn't sacrifice your truth for comfort. You didn't betray who you are for who you thought you should be. That's the test. And you passed it. Not because you're special or chosen or better than anyone else, because you were willing to sit in the fire long enough to let everything false burn away. And what's left? This version of you reading these words right now. That's real. That's solid. That's unshakable. This video found you because the test is complete. The lesson is learned. The transformation is done. Everything from here is application. You're not becoming anymore. You are. This video found you once. That was all it needed. The rest is yours.